When I turned 58, I planned a small dinner to celebrate 20 years since I bought the house. My house, the one I raised my only son in. I cooked his favorite dish, set out Lily's little plate, and even lit the candles. But they never came. Hours later, I saw photos of them laughing at a vineyard, no mention of me. The next morning, when I asked gently why they didn't show, my son said, "Mom, this is our home now. You really need to stop interfering." I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I just smiled and quietly opened a file that would make them wish they'd never crossed me. My name is Linda Barnes. I'm 58 years old, and for the past 2 decades, I've lived in the same creaky colonial house tucked just outside of Portland. It's not large or flashy. The paint peels a bit in winter, and the pipes complain when I run the water too hot. But to me, it's never just been a house. It's been my sanctuary, my history, and the only real witness to the life I built with trembling hands after everything else fell apart. 20 years ago, I stood in front of this place with a toddler on my hip and a heart full of fear. Josh was only 5 then, and his father had just passed from a sudden heart attack. No warning, no goodbye. He left me with grief, a handful of insurance money, and a son who still asked when Daddy was coming home. I remember signing the mortgage papers with shaking fingers, wondering if I'd just made the stupidest mistake of my life. But that little house? It never failed me, and neither did I. Raising a child alone was never easy. I taught high school during the day and graded papers by night. There were nights I'd fall asleep sitting upright on the couch, still holding Josh's laundry basket. I cooked every meal from scratch, clipped coupons like it was an Olympic sport, and somehow always managed to keep the lights on. Josh grew up on hand-me-downs and library books, but he never went to bed hungry, never missed a field trip, and never once heard me complain. I remember every creak in this house because I've stepped on them 1,000 times. I know exactly how the sunlight hits the living room at 4 p.m. in July, and how the upstairs bathroom smells faintly like lavender from the potpourri I've kept there since 2007. I planted the hydrangeas in the front yard the summer after I bought the place. They still bloom bright blue, stubborn and soft, just like me. And the house became more than shelter. It became a quiet witness to my choices, especially the ones I never told anyone about. 12 years ago, I met someone. His name was Richard, a gentle, kind man who taught piano and always held the door for strangers. He loved jazz and made the best cornbread I'd ever tasted. For nearly a year, he brought me daisies every Friday and kissed my hand like I was something precious. When he proposed, I didn't say no because I didn't love him. I said no because I was afraid that bringing someone new into this house, into Josh's space, might make him feel like he wasn't enough. Josh was still finding his footing in college, still needing me, or at least I thought he did. So I let Richard go. I cried into my pillow for weeks, but I never told Josh. He didn't need to know the sacrifices I made. That was the role of a mother, wasn't it? To give everything, even silence, when it protected your child. Over the years, this house saw birthdays, scraped knees, college acceptance letters, and heartbreaks. Josh left for university, came back during summers, and eventually moved out for good, or so I thought. The quiet that followed wasn't lonely, it was earned. I rediscovered things I loved: gardening, painting, reading mystery novels in bed without having to explain the plot to anyone. The solitude felt like exhale after decades of holding my breath. People asked if I was ever scared, living alone. I'd smile and tell them the truth. Not once, because this house is mine. Every nail, every beam. It's the one place in this world I built with my own hands. I'm safe here. That's what I believed, right up until the moment I realized that safety can be an illusion, that sometimes the deepest betrayals come not from strangers, but from the very people you once sacrificed everything for. But I'm getting ahead of myself. At 58, I still made my own coffee every morning, still did the crossword in pen, still talked to my hydrangeas like they were old friends. I didn't have much, but I had peace. And then, one rainy November afternoon, everything began to change. It started with a knock on the door, followed by a familiar voice saying, "Hey, Mom, is now a good time to talk?" Josh stood on the porch in the same navy hoodie he used to wear in high school, his arm draped around Emma's shoulder, their 3-year-old daughter Lily hiding behind his legs, clutching a stuffed giraffe with one ear chewed nearly flat. Rain trickled off the awning as they stood there, hesitant. He didn't have to say a word. I knew. "Come inside," I said, stepping aside. That afternoon, over lukewarm tea and hesitant smiles, they explained everything. The startup Josh had poured his savings into had collapsed. Emma had been let go from her marketing job 2 weeks earlier. Their lease was up and they couldn't afford a new place. "Just until we get back on our feet," Josh said. "A few months, tops." I didn't ask for rent. I didn't ask for a timeline. I simply nodded and started clearing out the guest bedroom. That night, I slept in the small upstairs room, the one with the drafty window and squeaky floorboards that Josh used to call the haunted corner. It didn't matter. They needed space. I had it. Simple math. Lily brought new life into the house. Her giggles filled the kitchen like sunshine. Every morning, she'd run down the hallway yelling, "Bama," her toddler abbreviation for grandma, and launch into my arms. We baked cookies. We planted marigolds. We read the same picture books over and over until she could recite them by heart. Emma was polite, always polite. She called me Linda, never Mom, but with a tone that suggested respect. She offered to cook some nights, reorganize the pantry to make space for their groceries, and even bought matching glass jars for the spices. She had a way of making herself comfortable in a space without ever asking. Still, I appreciated the effort. Josh, for his part, seemed relieved. He worked from his laptop in the dining room, spent more time with Lily, and even helped me fix the leaky faucet that had been dripping since August. We had late-night talks again, about life, about his dreams, about how hard it was to feel like he'd failed. I reminded him that failure wasn't falling down, it was staying down. He hugged me that night. It felt real. There was a rhythm to our days, shared dinners, movie nights. I even bought a whiteboard calendar to keep track of who needed the car when Emma had interviews and Lily's preschool days. It felt domestic, chaotic in the best way. For a time, I believed this would draw us closer, that maybe I'd finally get to be part of a full family again. I caught myself smiling more. I started sleeping better, even in the cramped room with the slanted ceiling. The house felt alive again, but little things began to shift. Emma started suggesting changes. First, just decor. We should move the couch to open up the space. Then routines. Maybe it's better if we keep the kitchen clear after 8 p.m., helps with Lily's bedtime. I didn't object. It made sense. But it was the tone, the assumption, that settled under my skin like a sliver of ice. Josh followed her lead, subtle but clear. When I'd offer an opinion on something, what to cook, where to place Lily's new toy bin, I was met with polite smiles and phrases like, "We've got it, Mom." Not harsh, not cruel, just dismissive. Still, I brushed it off. I told myself they were adjusting, that it was hard to go from independence to relying on someone again. I reminded myself that sharing a space required compromise. I'd done harder things. Then came the weekend they bought new curtains, long, modern gray panels that clashed horribly with the floral drapes I'd sewn years ago. "We just thought it'd brighten the place up a bit," Emma said. They were already hung. I stood in the kitchen that evening, watching Lily swirl yogurt with cereal, and told myself it didn't matter. Curtains were curtains. What mattered was family, was togetherness. But deep down, something in me stirred. A whisper I'd ignored for years, now growing louder. This isn't temporary. This is shifting. I pushed the thought away and focused on what I still had. Lily's laugh, Josh's half smile when he sipped my coffee, the creak of the stairs under familiar footsteps. I was still their mother. This was still my home. Wasn't it? The first time I noticed something missing, It was small, barely worth mentioning. The wooden owl figurine that used to sit on the mantel, a gift from Josh when he was 10, was gone. I searched the shelves, the hall cabinet, even the laundry room. Nowhere. When I asked Emma, she blinked and said, "Oh, I thought it was broken. It looked a little dusty." She smiled. "Hope you don't mind. I boxed it up." I didn't argue. It was just one thing, but one turned into several. The patchwork quilt my mother had stitched by hand vanished from the couch. A stack of cookbooks I'd collected over decades was replaced by minimalist, clean-spined hardcovers. Even the ceramic cat that had sat in the kitchen window for years disappeared one morning, replaced by a tiny succulent in a white pot. Each change was framed as an improvement, more modern, more open, more efficient. Emma spoke with the warm, breezy tone of someone who believed she was doing everyone a favor. Then came the schedule. One morning, I walked into the kitchen around 8:15 a.m., still in my robe, craving coffee. Emma was already there, placing cut fruit on Lily's plate. "Oh," she said lightly, "I thought we agreed on kitchen hours. I'm trying to keep mornings calm for Lily. It's easier if we all stick to a rhythm." I froze, hand hovering near the cabinet. "Kitchen hours?" "Yeah," she said with a chipper tone like she was confirming a dinner reservation. "We talked about it last week, remember? Just to help Lily sleep better. Quiet mornings, quiet evenings. Maybe after 9 a.m. works best for everyone." I didn't remember agreeing to anything, but Josh had nodded along, so I let it go. Later that week, I came home from the store and found my bedroom door open. Inside, my nightstand had been moved, my reading lamp replaced. On my dresser, there was a folded note. "Hope you don't mind the rearrangement. The light flows better this way. Emma." I stared at it for a long moment. Then I sat on the bed and looked around, feeling suddenly like a guest in a hotel that vaguely resembled my home. I tried to talk to Josh that night. We were folding laundry in the den when I said, "It feels like things are shifting. I'm not sure I understand what's going on." He looked tired, really tired. "Emma's just trying to help. She's used to running a tight ship. You know how she is." "But this is my ship, Josh," he sighed. "We're just trying to make it work. That's all." A few days later, I was searching for a document in the kitchen drawer, the catch-all place where I kept everything from coupons to insurance papers. Buried beneath a stack of old receipts, I found a manila folder marked Refinancing Proposal. I almost didn't open it, but I did. Inside were several pages, copies of a proposed loan application, drafts of equity release forms, and a joint ownership declaration for the house. My house. And on the bottom of one page, clear as day, were 3 typed names: Josh Barnes, Emma Barnes, and Linda Barnes. I stared at the line where my signature should have been. It was blank. The date on the form was from 6 months ago. My heart pounded in my ears. I shuffled through the rest of the folder. More paperwork, Emma's handwriting on sticky notes, an email printout from a loan officer. None of it made sense, at least not at first. Then I remembered something. Months earlier, Emma had asked for a copy of my ID to enroll me in a wellness newsletter she said came with coupons for seniors. She'd printed something and had me sign a form, something about consent to receive information. I hadn't thought twice. My stomach turned. Was that how they got my info? Had they started this months ago, while I was happily baking banana bread and reading bedtime stories? That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the small room I'd given myself, surrounded by walls I used to own completely, and listened to the sounds of the house I no longer recognized. The wind in the attic vent, the click of the fridge, the hushed voices from down the hall, Josh and Emma talking behind a closed door. I didn't hear the words. I didn't need to, because something was very, very wrong. It was a Thursday when I decided to throw the dinner. Nothing fancy, just roast chicken with lemon and rosemary, the way Josh used to like it, and Lily's favorite mashed sweet potatoes with marshmallows on top. I baked a small cake from scratch, chocolate with vanilla frosting, decorated with tiny, shaky piping that read, 20 years home. I'd spent the morning ironing the old lace tablecloth I hadn't used in years. I even set out the wedding china, white porcelain with a faded blue rim, a gift from my mother-in-law that I'd only ever used for birthdays and holidays. This felt like a holiday. 2 decades since I bought the house. 2 decades since I built something out of nothing. I didn't tell Josh and Emma the full reason. I just said, "I'm making dinner Thursday. It'd mean a lot if you joined." Josh had nodded absently. "Sure, Mom, if we're not too swamped." Emma smiled without looking up from her phone. "We'll see how the day goes." I cooked anyway, because hope is a muscle I never stopped flexing. By 6, the table was set. The food was warming in the oven. I changed into a navy blouse and put on earrings for the first time in months. At 6:15, I lit the candles. At 6:30, I checked my phone. No messages. At 7, I turned off the oven and stared at the untouched plates. I paced. I tried calling Josh. It rang once, then went to voicemail. I left a simple message. "Dinner's ready. Just wondering if you're still coming." At 7:30, I sat at the table alone and cut into the roast chicken, even though I wasn't hungry. It was dry. The potatoes had gone cold. At 8, I opened my laptop. Out of reflex more than curiosity, I clicked open Facebook. I hadn't been on in a while, too busy lately. The homepage refreshed, and for a second I thought something was wrong. My feed was empty. No posts from Josh, no photos of Lily, no updates from Emma. Confused, I clicked to Josh's profile. A message popped up. "This content isn't available right now." My heart thudded once, loud, sharp. I opened Emma's page. Same message. I grabbed my phone, opened Instagram. I searched Josh's name. His profile was private. Emma's too. I didn't remember them being private before. Or maybe they hadn't been. Maybe something had changed. I opened the account of a friend we shared, my old neighbor, Carol. I scrolled through her following list, clicked on Josh's name, and there it was, a new photo. Josh, Emma, and Lily, standing in front of a vineyard. Emma held a glass of wine, laughing into the sun. Josh had Lily on his shoulders, his arm around Emma's waist. The caption read, "Family Day Daku Grateful, Shiani Family First." It had been posted 2 hours ago. I blinked at the screen, trying to process what I was seeing. I refreshed. Another photo. Emma sipping wine beside a cheese platter. Josh clinking glasses with a friend I didn't recognize. Lily running through the grapevines, hair tied in pigtails. I looked at the timestamp. All posted within the last hour. They weren't late. They never intended to come. And they had hidden it from me. I sat there in silence. The only sound was the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of the old wall clock. I could still smell the lemon on the chicken. The frosting on the cake had begun to melt. I didn't cry, not right away. Instead, I stood slowly, walked over to the dining table and blew out the candles. Then I opened the window. The night air was sharp, the kind that carried the first hints of winter. I watched the flames curl and disappear, the smoke drifting into the dark like something vanishing without a trace. Back inside, I cleared the plates, scraped the food into containers, washed the dishes one by one. I wrapped the cake in foil and tucked it into the fridge, even though I knew no one would eat it. It wasn't until I was drying my hands, standing in the dim light of the kitchen, that the tears finally came. Not loud, not desperate, just steady. Not because they forgot, but because they remembered and chose not to come. The next morning, I waited for someone to say something, for Josh to come into the kitchen with an apology, maybe holding Lily in his arms, saying they'd lost track of time, or that the car broke down. I waited for Emma to peek around the corner with that overly sweet voice, pretending nothing had happened, but no one came. By noon, the silence became unbearable. I found Josh in the living room, scrolling on his phone while a children's cartoon blared in the background for Lily. She was sprawled on the rug, humming to herself, content and oblivious. I stood there a moment, watching my son, this grown man I had once taught to tie his shoes, sitting in my house like a guest in someone else's life. "Josh," I said quietly, "can we talk?" He didn't look up. "Sure," I hesitated. "I made dinner last night." "Yeah, we saw your text," he said, eyes still on the screen. "You said you'd come. I cooked. I set the table." I waited. He looked up then, his expression blank. "We needed a break. Emma planned the outing weeks ago. She told you, didn't she?" "No," I said. "She didn't, and I saw the photos, the posts. Only I had to see them from someone else's profile because, apparently, I've been blocked." Josh finally put the phone down. "Mom, look," he started, voice clipped. "It's not personal. Emma just needs space sometimes. And honestly, this whole arrangement is starting to feel tight." "Tight?" He sighed and rubbed his temples. "The house, the dynamics, everything. Look, I know you think this is still your place, and yeah, technically it is, but we live here now. We have a child, a routine, and sometimes it feels like you're interfering." I blinked, the air thick in my lungs. "This is our home now, Mom. You need to understand that." I stood there, frozen. Our home. Not yours. Not mine. Ours. He might as well have slapped me. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just nodded, turned, and walked back to my room that used to be the master bedroom, now stripped of its warmth and repurposed into a storage space for their overflow. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in the armchair by the window, blanket over my lap, watching the trees sway in the wind outside. The house creaked like it was trying to comfort me, but the creaks sounded different now, less familiar, less kind. I got up around midnight, restless. I went to look for a notebook to write in, something to pour the storm out onto paper. As I rummaged through the desk drawer in the hallway, I found an open envelope tucked under a pile of Lily's drawings. It wasn't addressed to me. It was a printout of an email chain between Emma and Josh. The subject line read, "Next Steps Refinancing Timeline." I didn't mean to read it, I didn't want to, but my eyes caught a sentence, bolded and underlined, in Emma's reply. "Don't worry, just a few more months and it'll all be settled. We'll have full access by spring." Below that, "She won't fight it, she's too tired. Just keep things smooth." My hands shook. I took the letter and sat on the edge of the bed. My ears rang. My heart thudded in my throat. They weren't just taking up space. They were planning, assuming, waiting me out. I folded the letter and placed it in my jewelry box, beneath the old photos and the tiny porcelain brooch my mother gave me. I sat in the dark for a long time, letting the truth settle like ash over everything I thought I knew. But I didn't fall apart. Not fully. Instead, I reached into the nightstand drawer and pulled out the small voice recorder I kept from my teaching days, back when I used to record lectures for absent students. I checked the batteries. Still working. The next day, I slid it into my pocket. No one noticed. Over the next week, I started recording every conversation I was part of. Casual chats, passive-aggressive remarks, whispered hallway exchanges. I became quiet, observant, invisible in a way that allowed me to hear what people really said when they thought I wasn't listening. Emma complaining to Josh about the old woman always hovering. Josh muttering, "We just need a few more signatures." Emma's laugh when Lily asked if Bama would live with them forever. "We'll see, sweetie. Nothing lasts forever." They thought they were winning. They didn't know I was listening. And when the time came, I would make sure they heard me loud and clear. It started with a drawer I hadn't opened in years. After that night with the email, I knew I needed more than gut feelings. Emotions don't hold up in court, paperwork does. So one morning, while Josh and Emma were out running errands, I pulled out the old metal filing cabinet from the hall closet. It was dusty, dented from years of use, and still had the same squeaky drawer from when I first bought it. Inside were decades of my life: birth certificates, tax returns, report cards, expired insurance documents. I sifted through folder after folder, searching for one label in particular: mortgage. When I found it, I sat cross-legged on the floor and began to read. The original deed, the purchase agreement, refinancing terms from when I took out a loan to help pay for Josh's college. It was all there. Then I found it. A folder labeled Equity Access 2022. I didn't remember creating that one. I opened it. Inside were at least 6 documents: applications for a home equity line of credit, a consent form to add a co-owner to the deed, a letter of intent to proceed with refinancing, and a few disclosures I didn't recognize. On one document, authorization to proceed, I saw my name, typed out neatly next to a digital signature: Linda Barnes. Only it wasn't mine. The curve of the L was wrong. The way the B looped, it didn't match my writing. And the date? It was from March. I hadn't signed anything since Christmas. My breath caught in my throat. I flipped through the others, finding more signatures that looked eerily similar. But not mine. It was like someone had traced them from an old check or document and tried to mimic them with a slightly trembling hand. I stood and walked to the kitchen, my knees weak. My coffee sat cold on the table. There was only one person I could trust with this. I grabbed my coat, tucked the folder under my arm, and drove 15 minutes to a small office behind a dentist's clinic. The sign read, Marjorie Keller, Notary and Document Services. Marjorie had been a friend once, a fellow teacher, and a part-time notary who helped me finalize my husband's will. We hadn't spoken in years, but I knew she'd tell me the truth. She looked up from her desk, squinting. Linda Barnes? My God, I haven't seen you in a decade. Hi, Marjorie, I need a favor, off the record. We sat at her desk while I spread the documents out in front of her. She didn't speak for several minutes, just skimmed through, her brow furrowing deeper with each page. Finally, she looked up. Where did you get these? They were in my house. My son and his wife. I stopped. They're trying to take the house from under me. I need to know if these signatures could hold up legally. She pointed to 3 of them. These look traced. See the way the ink pressure is uneven? Someone probably used a light box or traced over a scanned copy. This one, she tapped the digital signature, Z, is registered to a different IP address than yours. I'd bet money on it. If you take this to an attorney, you could have a solid fraud case. The words hit like a blow and a breath at once. Relief. Rage. I closed the folder. Thank you, Marjorie. I needed to hear it from someone who wasn't in my head. As I stood to leave, a memory flickered. Sharp, clear, and out of place. Emma in the kitchen months ago holding a clipboard. Can I borrow your ID real quick? I found this cooking class that gives senior discounts, and they need proof of age. I'll print the form and have you sign it. Should be quick. I remembered laughing, saying, as long as you don't sign me up for skydiving. She had smiled, sweet as sugar. Just trying to save you a few bucks. It wasn't a cooking class. It was this. I drove home in silence, my fingers tight around the steering wheel. By the time I pulled into the driveway, I had a plan. I wouldn't confront them. Not yet. Let them keep thinking I was in the dark. Let them feel safe. Because they'd already made one mistake, assuming I was weak. I had no intention of letting them make a second one. The next morning, I called an old contact I hadn't spoken to in years. Tom Whitaker, a retired attorney who once helped my husband with a contract dispute back in the 90s. He now did consulting and private work, mostly for quiet cases that never touched a courtroom. Just the kind of man I needed. When I reached him, I spoke calmly, measured, the way women our age are trained to speak when we want to be taken seriously but not make a scene. Tom, I said, I need to know everything I legally still own, and everything someone else may have tried to touch without my consent. He didn't ask questions. We scheduled a meeting for the next day. I brought every document I could find, the fake signatures, the loan forms, even the sticky note from Emma. He scanned them quickly, nodding as he made notes. "You're smart to come to me first," he said. "People don't realize how easy it is for family to exploit legal gray zones, especially if there's trust and shared history. I need to know what they've already done and what they're trying to do next." "Leave it with me," he said. "Give me a week." It only took 3 days. When he called back, his voice had that edge of something more serious than I expected. "I ran a full background check on Emma. Public records, civil cases, digital footprints. I also looked into Josh's financial history, with your permission, of course." "Of course," I said. "What did you find?" "She's been involved in a legal dispute before. Small town in Nevada, back in 2015. Her grandmother had early-stage dementia. Emma was named power of attorney, but there was a petition to revoke it after multiple cash withdrawals and an attempt to sell the grandmother's condo." I closed my eyes. What happened? Family settled out of court. The records were sealed, but I got access through an old contact. The pattern is familiar. "And Josh?" I asked, my voice quieter. Tom hesitated. "There's something else. I reviewed banking records you gave me access to, specifically that gap in 2022 when you had your car accident." I remembered it clearly. I'd slipped on wet concrete in front of the grocery store. A concussion, some memory fog. Nothing serious, or so I thought at the time. "You were hospitalized for 2 nights. During that same week, a transfer of $20,000 was made from your checking account into an external account under the name Joshua Barnes." My breath caught. That money was in a separate account. I never gave him access. Tom sighed. "The transfer used online banking credentials, same password you'd used for years. No fraud report was filed because technically it was a known recipient." I thought back to that week. The dizziness, the missing pieces, how Emma had handled my phone while I rested, saying she was responding to messages and keeping people updated. I never saw that transaction. "You wouldn't have," Tom said. "It was buried in regular monthly activity. No red flags unless you were looking for it." A silence stretched between us. "Linda," he added gently, "you're not the first mother this has happened to, but you can be one of the few who does something about it." When I hung up, I sat in my car outside his office and stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. What did I look like now? A woman betrayed? A fool? Or someone finally waking up? That night, I didn't cook dinner. I told Josh and Emma I had a headache. They didn't push. Emma reheated leftovers. Josh went back to his laptop. Lily played quietly on the floor. I sat in the dim light of my room, voice recorder tucked in my pocket, and wrote down every detail I could remember. Every lie, every slip, every, "Don't worry, it's just a form" moment I'd brushed off for years. This wasn't just about a house anymore. It was about dignity. About what was stolen, not in dollars, but in faith. In the belief that love protected you from harm. That family couldn't become threat. They were building a case behind my back. They didn't know I was building one of my own, and when I was done, I wouldn't just take my house back. I'd make sure they understood what it meant to cross someone who had already given them everything. I found the folder on a Tuesday. Emma was out with Lily at a library reading session. Josh was upstairs on a conference call. I used the time the way I always did now, quietly, invisibly, methodically. I'd learned to move through my own house like a stranger, light on my feet, silent, forgettable. It was incredible how much you could overhear when people stopped seeing you as someone who mattered. The folder was tucked behind a stack of board games in the hallway cabinet, games we hadn't touched in months. At first glance, it looked like a packet from Lily's preschool, colorfully labeled, bright tabs, but the label stopped me cold. Private Care Transition Plan, Spring 2024. I opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a brochure from a luxury assisted living facility 2 towns over. Photos of yoga classes, chef-prepared meals, and smiling staff filled the glossy pages. There was a pre-admission form partially filled out, with my name typed in the upper corner. Linda Barnes, age 58. Diagnosis: early onset cognitive decline. Suspected. The line hit like a slap. Another sheet included notes about timing discussions carefully and reassuring subject about quality of life benefits. Under one section, legal consent required for property transfer. Initiate power of attorney process if not already complete. I sat down right there on the carpet, the pages shaking in my hands. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a pushy daughter-in-law with bad boundaries. This was a strategy, a plan, and I was the final box to be checked off. I pocketed the documents and went to my room, locked the door, sat on the bed in silence for almost an hour. Later that night, I checked the recorder. I'd left it running on the hallway shelf that afternoon, half hidden behind a row of candles Emma insisted on displaying. I scrolled through the time-stamped file, then hit play when I saw a chunk of audio around 2:43 p.m. Emma's voice came through, crisp and clear. She was on the phone. Honestly, she's slipping faster than I expected. She forgot what day it was yesterday, thought she left the stove on and hadn't even cooked. A pause, then a laugh. No, I'm not worried. She's still signing her name. That's the only thing that matters. A few more months and we'll have everything finalized. Josh is on board, just doesn't want to be the face of it. Another pause. Babe, she doesn't even know where half her mail is. She's not going to fight this. I sat frozen, the recorder still playing. My fingers clenched the armrest so tightly my knuckles turned white. By the time spring comes, Emma said, her voice casual, smug, she'll be in a 5-star facility eating Jell-O and playing bingo. The house will be ours. She won't even notice it's gone. The file ended a few minutes later. I played it again, twice. Then I slipped the recorder into a drawer, replaced the candles on the shelf, and took a long breath. This was it. They were trying to erase me, and I knew exactly how to stop them. The next morning, I shuffled slowly into the kitchen, wearing slippers and a mismatched sweater. My hair was unbrushed. I let my eyes wander, let my mouth tremble when I asked Emma what day it was. She gave me a look, curious, alert. Tuesday, she said slowly. Oh, I thought it was Sunday, I replied with a dazed smile. Must have gotten mixed up. I let myself forget the sugar in my tea, misplace my glasses, repeat questions I already knew the answer to. Josh looked concerned once or twice. Emma? She looked satisfied. I watched them talk to each other with sidelong glances, heard Emma whispering things like, she's slipping, and we should move the timeline up. Every move they made, I documented. Every form they slid across the table. Just to check, I copied before I signed. Every conversation that ended with, don't worry, we'll handle it, was recorded in full. And at night, I gathered my growing collection of evidence. They thought I was fading. What they didn't realize was that I was watching. More awake than ever. More dangerous than they could imagine. It was time. The recordings, the forged documents, the secret folder Emma had hidden in the hallway cabinet. It was all enough to paint a clear picture of their plan. And more importantly, it was enough to stop it. But I didn't want to just stop them. I wanted them to see it coming and realize, too late, that they had misjudged the one person who had handed them everything. The first thing I did was contact Tom again. This time, I didn't meet at his office. We used encrypted email and burner phones. His idea, not mine. He said Emma had a history of watching things she wasn't supposed to. Through Tom, I began the legal process of listing my home for a private cash sale. I kept the listing off the public MLS. It went through a trust name I'd set up years ago, back when I thought estate planning was just for people wealthier than me. I Ironically, it was the one thing I'd done purely for peace of mind. Now it was my lifeline. The house sold in 4 days. I didn't tell a soul. The title, the deed, the proceeds, all routed through the trust and into a new locked savings account that only I had access to. It was set up in a small local credit union under a version of my maiden name. Emma would never find it. Next, I purchased a small condo in a quiet coastal town 3 hours away. 1 bedroom, a cozy reading nook, walking distance to the library and grocery store. It had sunlight in the mornings and a tiny patio for flowers. It wasn't much, but it was mine. I paid in full. The new place would be waiting for me, ready and untouched. Back at the house, I kept playing the part. I let Emma reorganize the medicine cabinet. I asked Josh twice in one day where Lily's dance class was. I took longer to respond to questions. I laughed at the wrong time. It was just enough to keep them convinced I was unraveling, but I kept recording everything. Then came the idea for the dinner. "I want to host a goodbye dinner," I said casually one morning, stirring oatmeal. "I've been thinking, maybe it's time for me to consider a senior community, one with people my age. That sounds nice, doesn't it?" Josh blinked at me. Emma nearly dropped her spoon. You mean like an assisted living place?" Emma asked carefully. I nodded. "It's not fair for me to take up space here. You two deserve the house. I know things have been tense. I just want peace." Emma was quiet for a moment, then reached across the table to pat my hand. "That's very brave of you, Linda." Brave. That was rich. They agreed to the dinner. "We'll invite Lily's godparents," Emma said. "Make it a celebration." "Just family," I replied, smiling. "Something simple." For the next week, I prepared. Not for a party, but for an ending. I packed my most valuable things into storage boxes I'd had Tom arrange for pickup. Everything else I left behind, the furniture, the curtains, the dishes Emma insisted on replacing. Let them have it. The bones of the house were never the point. The night before the dinner, I sat in my small room one last time. I looked at the worn carpet, the chipped dresser, the photo of Josh as a boy that I'd never moved from the nightstand. I didn't cry, not anymore. There was no sadness left, only resolve. I reached under the bed and pulled out the small lockbox. Inside was the recorder, copies of every document, the transcript of Emma's phone call, and a final letter, addressed to Josh. I placed it in a padded envelope and tucked it into the drawer next to the wine glasses. They'd find it the next day. Then I stood, smoothed the sheets, and whispered goodbye to the walls that had kept me safe for 20 years. They'd served me well, but I wasn't going to let them become my prison. "I'd like to have a dinner," I told them one morning, my voice just a little softer than usual. "Just the 5 of us, a small celebration, to say goodbye." Josh looked up from his cereal, puzzled. Emma froze mid-scroll on her phone. "Goodbye?" she asked, tone cautious. I nodded, letting my hand tremble slightly as I reached for my tea. "I think it's time. You were right. This house isn't mine anymore. I've made some calls. Found a place by the coast that offers support, structure. I've always loved the ocean." Josh blinked. "You're moving out?" "I am," I said with a tired smile. "The paperwork's already in motion. I thought it would feel sad, but it doesn't. I feel relieved." Emma covered her mouth like she was holding back emotion. "Linda, that's very mature of you." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I just nodded again. "Let's have dinner this Friday. One last time, just us." They agreed quickly. Too quickly. The rest of the week passed in a strange sort of silence. I could see the wheels turning behind Emma's eyes. She began subtly shifting things, clearing space in the hall closet, asking Lily if she'd like her toys moved into Grandma's room. Josh helped install a new lock on the front door, saying it would be safer with fewer people coming and going. I smiled through all of it. The house was already sold. The money already moved. I just had to make it through one more meal. On Friday afternoon, I set the table like I always did, with care. The blue-rimmed china, linen napkins, silverware that had belonged to my mother. I lit the tall white candles and placed a vase of fresh sunflowers at the center. The kitchen smelled like rosemary and garlic. I had roasted 2 chickens, made mashed potatoes and green beans the way Lily liked them. I even baked a peach cobbler for dessert. Josh came in first, hair combed, shirt tucked. He looked pleased. Emma followed, dressed a little too formally for a family dinner, lips painted in a soft coral that matched her earrings. She carried a bottle of wine and set it down gently beside the glasses. "To new beginnings," she said, almost whispering. Lily ran in last, barefoot, wearing one of the old aprons I used to let her play dress-up in. "Is this the party, Mama?" I leaned down and kissed her head. "Yes, sweetheart, this is the party." We sat down at the table. I took the seat at the head, the one I'd always sat in, but I noticed the way Emma glanced at Josh. Just a flicker, a tiny twitch of something unspoken. Dinner was quiet. Too quiet. Everyone was eating, but no one really tasted the food. Josh made small talk about Lily's school. Emma complimented the chicken. I nodded, smiled, took bites I barely chewed. I let my shoulders slump a little. Let my eyes drift like I was having trouble following the conversation. Every pause stretched just a second too long. Lily talked the most. She told me about her favorite book and the bugs she'd seen outside. I clung to her voice like a lifeline. I caught Emma watching me when she thought I wasn't looking. Her eyes scanned my face, searching for signs of weakness, forgetfulness, hesitation, confusion. I gave her just enough to confirm what she wanted to believe. After dinner, I cleared the dishes slowly, deliberately. Emma offered to help, but I waved her off. "I've got it, one last time." In the kitchen, I rinsed each plate carefully and stacked them in the drying rack. I could hear them talking in low voices in the dining room, the occasional murmur of, "She's really doing it," and "We're almost there." I dried my hands, walked back in, and sat down at the table again. My heart was beating fast, but my face gave nothing away. "Thank you," I said softly, looking at both of them, "for letting me stay here this long. I know it hasn't been easy." Emma shook her head. "It was never a problem. We're just glad you found something that works for you." Josh nodded, not meeting my eyes. I looked at Lily. "You'll come visit me, won't you?" She frowned. "But why are you leaving?" "Sometimes," I said gently, "you have to go so others can grow." She didn't understand, but she nodded anyway. The candles burned lower, the wine glasses sat half empty. The storm hadn't come yet. But it was on the horizon. The silence lingered as I stood from my chair and walked slowly toward the hallway bookshelf. I reached behind the row of framed photos and pulled out a small, black digital recorder, the kind you could buy at any office store, simple, nondescript, and devastating when used correctly. Emma stiffened. Josh glanced at her, confused. "What's that?" I walked back to the table, placed the recorder in the center between the wine glasses, and pressed play. Emma's voice filled the room. She's slipping faster than I expected. She forgot what day it was yesterday. "Just a few more months and we'll have everything finalized." Josh's brow furrowed. "What?" The next recording clicked in automatically. Emma again, laughing lightly. "By the time spring comes, she'll be in a 5-star facility eating Jell-O and playing bingo. The house will be ours. She won't even notice it's gone." Josh froze. Emma's face drained of color. A third clip played. "Don't worry, we'll get her to sign. She doesn't even ask what things are anymore. Just smile, nod, and she'll write her name." Right. I hit stop. The room was heavy with the kind of stillness you only feel after a car crash, where sound has yet to return to the world. I didn't sit back down. Instead, I reached for the large envelope I'd tucked beside my chair and slid it onto the table. Slowly, carefully, I spread out the contents. First, a notarized statement from Marjorie confirming the signatures on several loan applications were not mine. Then, the private investigator's summary of Emma's sealed case in Nevada, the one involving her grandmother's assets. Next, a certified bank record showing the $20,000 transferred from my account to Josh's during the week I was hospitalized with a head injury. Finally, the contract for the sale of the house. Signed, sealed, and already closed. I'm not going to a facility, I said. I'm not losing my home because it's already gone, sold. The money is secure, and you, I looked at Emma, you will never touch a cent of it. Josh's mouth opened, then closed again. His face twisted with something like panic. Wait, Mom, what are you talking about? You sold the house? I nodded. 2 weeks ago, quietly, through a trust you didn't know existed. But we live here, he said, voice rising. You did, I said, until tomorrow morning. Emma stood, knocking her chair back with a loud scrape. You can't do that. We have rights. Lily lives here. This is her home. I looked at her calmly. No, this was never your home. It was a gift, one you mistook for entitlement. You made plans behind my back, forged my signature, and mocked me while doing it. Josh ran a hand through his hair, visibly shaking. I didn't know she was doing that, I swear. You knew enough, I said, softer now. You didn't ask questions. You let her do the work so you could keep your hands clean. But silence is complicity, Josh. You know that. He looked at me then. Really looked. And for the first time in years, I saw the boy he used to be flicker through the man he had become. I thought you were just tired. I didn't think... No, I cut in. You didn't think. You assumed. Emma was pale now, staring down at the documents like they might catch fire. I turned to Lily, who had crawled under the table during the commotion and was peeking out at me, wide-eyed and confused. It's okay, baby, I said gently. Everything's okay. Then I looked back at Josh, my voice quiet but unwavering. You won't lose your mother, Josh, but I won't lose myself to be her. No one spoke for a long moment. Then I picked up the recorder, the documents, and the now empty envelope. I walked toward the hallway, my footsteps measured and final. Behind me, no one moved. The storm had arrived, and I was the one who brought the lightning. The night ended with silence. No shouting, no slamming doors, just quiet, thick and heavy like smoke after a fire. I went back to my room and closed the door softly behind me. I packed the last of my things. 2 suitcases, 1 small duffel, and a jewelry box filled with letters, photos, and the little porcelain brooch my mother once gave me. I left everything else behind. The house no longer belonged to me. That was the point. At 10:45 p.m., the moving van pulled up outside. Tom had arranged it through a private company that specialized in late-night relocations. Discreet. No questions asked. A young man in a navy windbreaker nodded respectfully as he began loading the boxes I had left in the garage earlier that week. I rolled my suitcase to the front door. Where are you going? Josh asked, stepping into the foyer, voice hoarse. I turned to him, taking in the hollow look in his eyes. He wasn't angry anymore, just lost. I told you, I said quietly. I've already gone. He looked down. Is there any way to fix this? Not tonight, I replied, and not in this house. Bama, from behind him, Emma stood on the stairs, arms crossed, eyes rimmed red, not from regret, but from exposure. You won't get away with this, she said flatly. I didn't respond. Instead, I bent down as Lily ran toward me in her pajama onesie, eyes wide, arms outstretched. Bama, are you going somewhere? She asked. I pulled her close. She wrapped her arms around my neck and whispered, Ba oi jung ji. My heart cracked clean in half. I have to, sweetheart, I said, kissing her hair, but I'll always be close. Always. She didn't understand, but she nodded anyway, because children, even small ones, know when something is real. I held her for a few moments more, then handed her gently to Josh. Take care of her, I said. She deserves better than this. Then I turned and stepped into the night. The wind was cold, but I didn't shiver. At exactly midnight, I crossed the county line. Behind me was a house I no longer recognized, filled with people I no longer trusted. Ahead of me, a new beginning. In the weeks that followed, everything unfolded as expected. Tom filed a legal complaint citing fraud, coercion, and forgery. Emma was summoned for questioning by local authorities, and the bank she tried to process the refinancing through was also contacted. The paper trail was clear. Her emails, the forged documents, the sealed case from Nevada, they built a pattern. Josh was named in the inquiry, not as a primary, but as a silent party. His financial involvement with the $20,000 transfer raised flags. When confronted, he admitted he hadn't known everything, but enough to make it hard to plead innocence. They weren't arrested, but they weren't untouched either. Emma lost her pending job offer at a marketing firm after the story reached the wrong inbox. Josh's credit score tanked after his name was linked to the fraudulent loan application. Their landlord at their next rental refused to renew their lease when the investigation showed up in a public database. And the house? The new owners, a quiet retired couple from Minnesota, moved in with plans to restore the garden I once tended. I sent them a handwritten list of where the hydrangeas bloomed best. As for me, I settled into my condo near the coast. It was small, bright, and smelled like salt and eucalyptus. The mornings were quiet. I drank tea on the balcony, read novels without interruption, and joined a book club filled with women who had stories that matched mine in spirit, if not in detail. Sometimes I walked along the beach and let the waves remind me that erosion isn't destruction, it's transformation. Once I saw Lily's name pop up in my inbox, a crayon drawing scanned into a JPEG. It showed a stick figure, grandma with flowers and a sun that took up half the page. No caption, just a heart. I printed it and taped it above my writing desk. Not everything lost stays gone. Some things, if you're brave enough to leave, will find their way back to you. Mornings came slower now and sweeter. In my new condo by the coast, the sun filtered through gauzy curtains and spilled across the hardwood floor like a warm invitation. I rose early, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I brewed tea instead of coffee, read a chapter of whatever novel was on my nightstand, and took my time pulling on walking shoes and a light sweater before stepping outside. The air here tasted different, cleaner, salted with sea breeze and eucalyptus. My condo sat just 2 blocks from the ocean, and every morning I walked the stretch of boardwalk that curved along the shore. I nodded at joggers, waved to the barista setting up chairs outside her cafe, and sometimes stopped to let the neighborhood golden retriever lick my hand. Eventually, I adopted a dog of my own, a rescue mutt named Henry with mismatched eyes and a crooked tail. He followed me everywhere. When I read on the beach, he dug holes in the sand beside me like he was trying to uncover buried treasure. I joined a local women's group, mostly women my age, many retired, some divorced, others widowed. A few had stories strikingly similar to mine, sons or daughters who had forgotten where they came from, partners who had drained them slowly, politely, until there was nothing left. We met twice a week, sometimes at the library, sometimes over wine. We didn't always talk about what had happened, but when we did, no one judged. We just listened, nodded, held space. One night, after one of those meetings, I came home and wrote my story. It started as a journal entry. Then it became a letter, then an essay. I titled it, "When the House You Built Becomes the Cage They Lock You In." I submitted it anonymously to a nonprofit organization called Daughters of Dignity, a support network for older women estranged from their families, women who had given too much and been left with too little. A month later, the piece was published on their website. I didn't expect what came next. Emails poured in, hundreds of them, from all over the country, some from women in their 30s who had watched their mothers go through something similar, others from women in their 70s who had never told a soul what their adult children had done to them. They said things like, "You put into words what I never could. I thought I was alone. You gave me the strength to leave." One woman from Ohio sent a photo of herself smiling in front of her new apartment, holding a sign that read, "Day 1 of Freedom, inspired by Linda." I wept when I saw it, and I kept writing. The organization asked if I'd be open to speaking at a virtual event. I hesitated. Me, speaking into a camera, but I said yes. That night, I sat in my reading chair. Henry curled at my feet and told my story to a group of strangers on Zoom. I talked about betrayal without bitterness. I talked about boundaries without blame. I talked about becoming invisible in your own home and what it takes to become visible again. Afterward, the chat box filled with hearts and thank yous and rows of women saying, "Me too." The next week, the group invited me to co-facilitate a new local chapter. I agreed. Not because I thought I had all the answers, but because I knew what it was like to have none. Life didn't become perfect. I still had days when I missed the sound of Lily's footsteps, when I wondered if Josh ever truly understood what he'd done. I still paused when I saw mothers and sons laughing in cafes, still hesitated before walking past toy stores. But those moments didn't undo me anymore. They just reminded me that healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means choosing peace anyway. At night, I lit a candle and wrote letters, not to send, just to say what needed saying, to the woman I used to be, to the son I still loved, to the future I was finally claiming. Henry would curl beside me, sighing into the quiet, and I would smile, knowing I had done the hardest thing a woman can do. I had saved myself. The knock on the door came on a Saturday morning, just as I was trimming the rosemary plant that had begun to overtake the windowsill. Henry barked once, then trotted to the door with his usual curiosity. I wasn't expecting anyone. Most of my visits were scheduled days in advance. Book club, neighbors, groceries. But when I opened the door, my breath caught. Lily stood there, taller than I remembered, her hair in a neat braid, backpack slung over one shoulder. She looked older, maybe more than the few months since I'd last seen her should have allowed. Or maybe I was just seeing her clearly for the first time, as someone stepping out of the shadow of others. Behind her stood Josh. He didn't say anything at first. His hands were in his pockets, his eyes low, shoulders hunched in the way I remembered from his teenage years, when he'd done something wrong and didn't know how to fix it. But Lily didn't hesitate. She threw her arms around me. "I missed you, Bama." I held her close, breathing in the scent of sunscreen and strawberry shampoo, and felt something inside me soften. Not forgive, not forget, but soften. Josh cleared his throat. I'm sorry," he said, "for everything, for not seeing it sooner, for not stopping it." I looked at him, this man I had raised, and I could see that life had done its work. His face carried the lines of consequence now. His words didn't come from fear. They came from weight. "I didn't know what I was letting happen until it was too late," he said. "Emma's gone. She left last month. Lily wanted to come here. I thought it was time." I nodded once, then turned to Lily. "You want to come in?" She beamed. "Do you still make those sweet potatoes with the little marshmallows?" I laughed. "Only on special occasions." "Well," she said, "this feels pretty special." They stayed for the afternoon. We didn't talk about the house. We didn't revisit every painful detail. Instead, we sat on the porch and ate sandwiches. Lily played fetch with Henry. Josh fixed the squeaky gate hinge without being asked. It wasn't a return. It was a visit. And that was enough. That night, after they left, I pulled out my journal, the one I started the night I left the old house. The pages were filled now. Stories of healing, names of women I'd met, quotes I'd copied from books, snippets of dreams that once felt impossible. On the last page, I wrote, "I don't regret loving them, but now I love myself first, and that changes everything." A month later, the nonprofit I'd worked with launched a storytelling series, short documentaries featuring women who had rebuilt their lives after betrayal, grief, or abandonment. They asked if I would share my story on camera this time. I hesitated. Then I said yes. We filmed it in one day. I sat in my reading chair by the window, Henry snoozing at my feet, and told the truth. About the house, the betrayal, the night I walked away, the life I built in the wake of loss. I didn't cry. I didn't try to make anyone look better than they were. I just told the truth. The video was posted on a Tuesday. By Friday, it had over 2 million views. People shared it with captions like, "The strength I needed today," and "This woman is everything." Strangers wrote emails, grandmothers, single moms, women in their 50s who thought it was too late. They said I gave them hope. One comment simply read, "The comeback queen." I smiled when I saw that, because that's what this was. Not revenge, not justice, a comeback, a return to myself, a reclaiming of worth. Now, on quiet evenings, I sit on the porch with a blanket and watch the sun dip into the ocean. I sip tea, stroke Henry's back, and feel no ache, just gratitude for what I lost, for what I found, and for the woman who finally came home to herself.